The Jackson Times, the weekly paper of Breathitt County, Kentucky, July the 6th, 1939, one day after the flood. Death toll mounts as high waters recede. 65 lives lost in the frozen section of the county, the paper reported. The number would keep changing for a week because the county did not yet know who was missing. This is the story of the deadliest flash flood in Kentucky's recorded history, and of one house, the only house the water left standing in one small town, and what happened to it 3 nights later. Breathitt County, eastern Kentucky. The county seat is Jackson. This is the courthouse, photographed the following year. Frozen Creek drains 55 square miles of steep hillside into the North Fork of the Kentucky River. The settlement sat in the creek bottoms, the only flat ground there was. What happened on that creek was documented twice, by the newspapers in the week it happened and by the Geological Survey and Water Supply paper 967B. July the 4th was hot and dry. That night, thunderstorms built to the north. Lightning so continuous, the survey recorded, that people watched the clouds move in what they called a purplish hue. The rain fell in roughly 3 hours between 1 and 4 in the morning. On Frozen Creek from about 2 until 4. Nobody knows how much rain fell because not one weather station stood inside the storm. The government's figures came from field parties measuring the water left in pails, tubs, and jars. From the pails, the survey concluded the rainfall probably exceeded 12 inches and may have reached 20 in about 3 hours. The Associated Press put it this way: the mountain people went to bed Tuesday night unmindful of the impending treachery of streams that ran past their door, merely trickling at times. Residents describe what came next: an approaching wall of water which billowed up like clouds, a 15-foot wall of water crashing down the valley. 20 feet in 10 minutes. Like thunder, one witness said, with livestock, pieces of houses, and countless other things all being whirled together on the breast of the torrent as if in a great mixing pot. Creek crested between 3:30 and 3:45 in the morning in the dark. Survivors said there was not the slightest warning. People trapped in their homes, the wire said, didn't have a chance. By Thursday, 43 bodies had been recovered at Jackson and at Moorhead, where a second arm of the storm came down Triplet Creek. Nearly 100 people were missing. A 12-year-old Benton Howard Jr. escaped through the glass of a door as the water reached his shoulders and rode 2 miles downstream, holding to a piece of tin. Gertrude Deaton was the only survivor in the family of Barney Deaton of Keck, rescued from a tree, where the child she carried had been swept from her hands. At Vancleve, a settlement of 75 people, the water took the Kentucky Mountain Bible Institute, its church, its school, the home of its minister, Reverend Myers. 16 people were on the property that night. By Thursday, 7 had been located. Gary Nathan Pelfrey, 1 year old, drowned when his family's home washed away. His father held the baby until the drift tore the child out of his arms. The parents were found alive, 2 miles below their home. By Thursday morning, the Red Cross had carpenters at the Jackson Builders Supply Plant making caskets. Identified bodies were buried as quickly as possible by order of the health officers. In some instances, the paper wrote, "Whole families, with the exception of 1 or 2 children or a parent, have been wiped out." The river carried the dead 30 miles to Beattyville in the next county. About 15 bodies were found there. Men rode the train down to identify them. Sheriff Walter Deaton estimated 75 drowned in the Frozen Creek Valley alone. He shared a surname with the family wiped out at Keck. In that valley, most people did. By Friday, the recovered stood at Breathitt 21, Rowan 25, Lewis 2. Dozens still missing. Searchers said openly that some bodies might never be found. Saturday's Lexington Herald Leader. Red Cross lists. 35. Flood victim. Still missing in Breathitt County section. The county health director feared the toll would pass 100. That morning's bulletin named 3 more dead. Louise Noble, 18. Forrest Howard, a child. An unidentified girl about 1 year old. Governor Happy Chandler called it probably the worst calamity of its kind ever to visit Kentucky. The suffering of our own people in the mountains, he said. Beggar's description. On Saturday, searchers found a body tentatively identified as Reverend Myers of the Bible Institute. The same day, they found 2 of his sons. Titus was 6. Philip was 5. They also found the Pelfrey baby and Florence Noble, who worked for the Pelfrey family. Which brings this story to the Pelfreys and to the house. W.H. Pelfrey was Vancleve's man of property. The store was the Pelfrey store. The garage was the Pelfrey garage. And his 2-story frame house stood above the creek. The flood put several feet of water inside it, and the family escaped by swimming. But the house held. At sunrise, it was the only house in that part of Vancleve still on its foundations. The Pelfreys moved into Jackson and posted a guard. At night, John Henry Banks watched the house. His father, Jim Banks, watched a bridge half a mile away. On Friday night, 2 days after the flood, with bodies still coming out of the drifts, 4 armed men came to the Pelfrey house. They stayed in the darkness, Banks told the sheriff, but thrust out guns so that he could see them. They told him to skidoo. "We'll do the guarding for a while." Banks walked the half-mile to his father's bridge. A few minutes later, the 2 of them watched the flames come up. The house burned to the ground with everything in it. The only house the flood had spared. Saturday's headline in Lexington: Fire destroys last dwelling in flood town. The Associated Press moved it nationwide in 4 sentences. 4 armed men approached a guard at the home and ordered him away a few minutes before the structure was fired. Banks could not name the men, and he believed they had disguised their voices. You disguise your voice from a man who would know it. Pelfrey said he knew of no enemies who might wish to destroy his home. The law. $5,000 by the sheriff's account, $10,000 by the local papers. Partly insured. The house, not the furniture. The sheriff said plainly he had no clue to the arsonists or their motives. The grand jury convened in Jackson the following Monday, Judge J. Brack Howard presiding. In every Kentucky paper we could search through 1941, no arrest for the fires ever reported. No indictment. No name. The record simply stops. A week after the flood, the county's own accounting arrived. 51 dead in Breathitt County. 43 recovered. 8 never found. Mrs. Earl Howard and her children, Forrest and Roberta, were buried together in one grave in the Watkins Cemetery near Quicksand. Across the whole storm area, the federal report counted 78 dead. The Red Cross counted 79. The engineers came that same month because the flood had beaten every instrument they had. No stream gauge existed in the high runoff area. They measured what the water left behind. In Moorhead, they photographed a home overturned by the force of the flow and a store pushed off its foundation. The railroad bridge on Triplet Creek washed out. The highway bridge over Cope Fork remains. The mouth of Frozen Creek, scoured to sand and stripped vegetation. Boone Fork under a thick deposit of mud. The flood ran 12 to 28 feet deep. The discharge figures came out so far beyond anything ever recorded in Kentucky that the survey refused to publish them for doubt of its own measurements. 13 months later, a photographer came up these same creeks. Marion Post Wolcott of the Farm Security Administration photographed this county in the late summer of 1940. This is the car that carried her and the school superintendent up the South Fork. This is her photograph of children going home from school up Frozen Creek, carrying their lunch pails. The creek bed was the road. Her caption talks about the lunch pails and the school term. It does not mention that 14 months earlier this creek killed more than 50 people in a single hour before dawn. She photographed mountain people carrying a homemade coffin up a creek bed to a family plot. Too isolated, the caption says, for formal funeral services. She photographed new graves, decorated for a memorial meeting in the mountains near Jackson. In August of 1940, some graves on these hillsides were not yet a year old, and hand-carved stones in a family cemetery. The dead that got named. 8 of the flood's dead never did. And she photographed the county's answer to catastrophe, a school that Superintendent Marie Turner was building in stone. The reason, in the caption, so many of the mountain schools have been burned down several times. Burned down several times. In this county, fire was an instrument. For a grudge, for a claim, for reasons a guard in the dark would not be told. The county built in stone because it knew its own history. Near Moorhead, a schoolhouse full of children, in a county that had buried 25 of its own the summer before. And at Quicksand School, a pie supper, a year after the creek it was named for backed up 6 miles. The flood has a federal report and a Red Cross file. The fair has 4 sentences on a wire and no ending. 4 armed men burned the last house in Vancleve, and nobody was ever named for it. If your people were on Frozen Creek or Quicksand or Triplet in 1939, if you grew up on a story about the flood or the fire, the comments are open. Somebody knew those 4 men. Somebody's grandchildren still might.